My dog just ate something toxic. What should I do? Well, that's a common question we get at the office quite a bit. Something toxic could be anything from your pills to somebody else's pills to a belly full of marijuana or marijuana edibles to chocolate to grapes to, well, you kind of get the idea. A dog eats something that it's not supposed to get, and you wonder what to do. Well, so here's the thing. Dogs are going to eat things that are believable. It's very rare for a dog to lick up a bunch of some sort of solvent or gasoline. They really tend not to want to ingest a lot of that. So what we get at the office mostly are pills that have a sugar coating. A dog that took 120 Advil, for example, because the sugar on the outside of the pill tasted good. They'll eat rat poison a lot of times. They like it. They'll eat chocolate, of course. If you catch that, if you discover that they've eaten something like that within 2 hours, the prognosis is actually decent because it takes up to 2 hours for the stomach to empty. So if they get a stomach full of medicine or toxin or whatever, the stomach does start to allow it into the small intestine pretty quickly, but the bulk of it is still in the stomach up to 2 hours. So if you catch it that early, you can induce vomiting, and I highly recommend that you do. And that includes most things that the dog would eat. Even like a belly full of chewed up chicken bones. And you might say, well, we don't want to induce vomiting because the chicken bones could stick in the esophagus on the way out. Well, yeah, they could also stick in the intestine. And they're a lot easier to get out of the esophagus than they are out of the intestine. So obviously there are judgment calls that have to be made based on what your dog has eaten. But for the most part, if you can get it within 2 hours, inducing vomiting is a great idea for the most part. That would be by the administration of hydrogen peroxide, just straight up 3% hydrogen peroxide like you'd get at the grocery store to dress little wounds and stuff. You would try to get a cup of hydrogen peroxide down any dog over 20 pounds. Try and get a cup. If a dog is over 50 to 60 pounds, getting it even 2 cups down would actually not be a bad idea. It might only take a tablespoon to get a small dog like a 3-pounder. Might only take a tablespoon to get that dog to throw up. But here's how that works. So the hydrogen peroxide is basically finagled down the dog's mouth and hits the stomach and starts to foam fairly violently, which creates massive nausea and rapid swelling in the stomach. Not the kind of swelling that pops the dog or anything, but it definitely sends the stomach into reverse pretty fast, pretty hard. Usually within 7 minutes, the dog is vomiting and they'll throw up the entire stomach content. And then usually a minute or two later, they'll throw up one more time, which may or may not have anything in it. And then they'll have 2 or 3 more spit-ups that are just small, not particularly dramatic throw-ups. At that point, when they're throwing up pretty much nothing but fluid, at that point, if you want to offer them some water, that neutralizes the effect in the stomach, if they'll drink, and then they're done. If they don't vomit within 7 minutes, go ahead and redose with hydrogen peroxide. And that is the best advice I can give you. Now, what happens if it's after 2 hours? What if they ate 120 Advil 3 hours ago or 4 hours ago? Well, that's kind of a thing. And at that rate, depending on what it is, you probably need to be on your way to an emergency room where they will still induce vomiting on the outside chance something is still in the stomach. But they'll also administer charcoal, black liquid charcoal. And what that does is it binds organic and inorganic molecules in the intestinal lumen You just hope that the charcoal gets through the intestine as fast as everything else does. And then depending on the toxin, for example, if it's Advil and they get enough of it, they'll be having seizures and neurological symptoms or gastrointestinal signs and bleeding. So while they're giving the charcoal to bind up the extra toxins in the system, they'll also be treating the side effects of the medicine. If it's a psychotropic or marijuana or chocolate or whatever, if it's jacking up the dog, they'll be addressing those side effects. There are things that dogs eat that can certainly kill them. Chocolate is not as fatal as people would think. I've only ever known of 2 dogs literally killed by chocolate, and they were in the house with Baker's unsweetened chocolate and ate ounces and ounces of it. Only one of the 2 died. The other one lived to a ripe old age, and then they were dachshunds. So yes, chocolate kills, but it takes a pretty good bit. Still, if it's been more than 2 hours, it's time to go to the emergency room and get some charcoal and then symptomatic treatment of what went down. I think that just about covers it. To recap, it's 2 hours or less. It's good to induce vomiting and call the vet, and then discussing what the dog swallowed, figure out what the side effects could be for over the next day or 3. If it's been longer than 2 hours, then probably straight to the emergency room, depending on what it is, so that they can administer charcoal to bind up the poison in the small intestine, and then treat the side effects as well, keeping kidneys functioning and all of the different things that may be impacted by the poison. So 2 hours, and the instructions on the use of hydrogen peroxide. That's the 2 important things in this video. Thanks for paying attention.